It began with a single unmarked jet drifting into restricted airspace. No markings, no transponder, no warning. Moments later, the sky tore open, and something far older than humanity stepped through. Not to conquer, but to judge. Across the globe, people began dreaming of spirals and burning worlds, feeling pulses in their bones they couldn't explain. Humanity wasn't under attack. We were being evaluated, measured, and invited into a terrifying truth. We weren't alone, and we were never in control. What they wanted next, it wasn't survival. It was a choice. It was supposed to be a quiet morning. The tarmac at Travis Ridge Air Base shimmered faintly under the Californian sun, the air humming with the low roar of turbines and the whine of jet engines in warm-up cycles. The sky was blue, almost too blue, clean, open, and infinite. Major Kyle Anders, a 14-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force, sipped from a stainless steel mug and looked out over the runway from the control tower's upper deck. It was barely 0800, and already the air was alive with heat and potential. "Tower, this is Echo 11, requesting permission to taxi to runway 27. The radio buzzed crisply, one of dozens of routine calls that marked the day's rhythm. Kyle nodded to his junior controller, Airman First Class Mara Nguyen, who toggled her mic with practiced ease. "Echo 11, taxi to runway 27 via Alpha. Hold short. You're number 2 for takeoff." Everything was clockwork. Kyle set his mug down and adjusted the cuff of his uniform. Out on the tarmac, an F-35 rolled forward in a graceful crawl, its pilot giving a subtle wave to the marshalling crew. Beyond it, rows of hangars shimmered under the morning sun, housing aircraft worth billions. Some were test birds, some were active duty, all were deadly. Then the radar chirped. It was small at first, a soft, almost dismissive beep. Kyle barely noticed it, but Nguyen did. She leaned forward, adjusting a dial, frowning at the screen. "Sir?" Kyle turned. Her eyes didn't move from the scope. "There's a target at 23 miles, low altitude, not squawking IFF, heading directly toward the base perimeter." He blinked. "Civilian?" No flight plan filed, no transponder, just popped up. The mug of coffee was forgotten. Kyle stepped forward, shoulders tightening. He leaned over the screen, tracking the blip. It was holding steady, too steady. No deviations, no climbs, no turns, just a direct path in, fast, low, and silent. He reached for the radio. "Base operations, this is Tower. We've got an unregistered contact approaching from the northwest. No beacon, no ID." A pause. Then a voice responded, calm but alert. "Copy, Tower. Standing by." Kyle tapped another button. "Echo 11, hold position. Do not proceed to runway. Repeat, hold position." "Roger that, Tower. Holding short." Down on the ground, the engines quieted. Jets halted mid-taxi. There was an unnatural stillness creeping across the base, like animals pausing before an earthquake. The radar chirped again. 15 miles, Nguyen murmured, still not squawking, altitude holding at 500 feet. Low, very low, too low for a commercial flight, too direct to be a mistake. "Get me eyes on that target," Kyle barked. "Visual confirmation now." Outside the tower, binoculars and scopes were pulled up. 2 spotters on the roof scanned the northern horizon. Then one of them gasped. "Contact, visual confirmation, it's a jet. Small, white, no markings." Kyle took the binoculars, pressing them hard to his eyes. A streak against the sky, sleek, silent, and fast. Civilian in appearance, but flying like it didn't care who saw it. No logos, no tail numbers, no contrails. "Jesus," he muttered. Back to the radio. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Travis Ridge Air Base. You are entering restricted military airspace. Identify yourself immediately, or you will be intercepted." Silence. Kyle turned toward Nguyen. "Scramble 2 interceptors, now." She was already on the phone. The base erupted in motion. Klaxons blared. Hangar doors screamed open. Within moments, 2 F-16s rolled out like unleashed wolves, their engines rumbling as crews sprinted around them. Pilots vaulted into cockpits. Within 90 seconds, they were taxiing toward the hot strip. Kyle watched the unknown jet. 8 miles now, still coming. Why would someone fly straight into a base like this? Nguyen asked under her breath. Kyle didn't answer. There were too many bad reasons and not nearly enough good ones. Interceptors airborne, came a call from ground ops. Skyhawk 1 and 2, bearing 335, moving to intercept. On screen, 2 blue dots flared to life, friendly. They banked hard toward the incoming contact. Kyle gripped the edge of the console. Unidentified aircraft, this is your final warning. You are ordered to alter course and contact this frequency. Failure to comply will result in interception. Still nothing. Then the jet did something unexpected. At 3 miles out, it slowed. Not drastically, but enough. From nearly 500 knots down to just over 300. Still fast, still dangerous, but a pause. A sign of what? Acknowledgement? It began to circle. "Sir," Nguyen said, "it's not heading directly for the runway anymore. It's loitering." Kyle narrowed his eyes. "What game are you playing?" The interceptors came into range. Skyhawk 1 to tower, visual on target. White Gulfstream-type jet. No markings. No heat signatures of weapons. "Do you want us to force divert?" Kyle hesitated. And that's when the jet spoke. A crackle on the emergency frequency. Then a male voice. Distorted, calm. "This is Guardian Actual. We are requesting secure landing clearance. Eyes-only authorization. Immediate." Nguyen's hand flew to her mouth. Kyle's jaw clenched. That phrase, Guardian Actual. It wasn't in any standard code book, but it wasn't unfamiliar either. It belonged to a program that technically didn't exist anymore. A black project shut down years ago, classified so deeply that only a handful of people were even cleared to speak its name. Kyle had only heard it once. And that was during a Pentagon briefing 5 years ago, the kind that came with non-disclosure oaths and veiled warnings. "Repeat," the voice said again. "This is Guardian Actual. We are requesting emergency secure landing. Do not interfere." Kyle picked up the secure line. "Base commander to tower. What's happening up there?" He explained quickly, efficiently. There was a pause. "Allow landing," the commander said finally. "Escort them to Hangar 17. I'll meet them myself." Kyle's eyes widened. "Sir, Hangar 17 is—" "I know exactly what it is. Do it." The call ended. Kyle looked at Nguyen. "Tell Skyhawk 1 to provide close escort, grant landing clearance, shut down every other runway. No eyes, no cameras." Nguyen nodded. The orders were relayed. Below, the base shifted into lockdown. Flights halted, personnel diverted. A blanket of secrecy fell over Travis Ridge like a fishhook, and the unmarked jet, its engines whispering, its presence unannounced to the world, turned gently toward the now empty runway and descended with surgical precision. Kyle watched it touch down, his heart thudding in his chest. Something had arrived, something they weren't supposed to see, something that could change everything. And that was only the beginning. The Gulfstream's wheels kissed the tarmac like a ghost landing. No bounce, no flare. It slid into the airstrip as though it had been made for it, smooth, silent, and surgical. "Skyhawk 1, escort completed," came the pilot's voice. "Target aircraft is taxiing toward Hangar 17. We're returning to base pattern unless otherwise directed." "Copy, Skyhawk 1," Kyle responded. "RTB and maintain radio silence." The 2 F-16s peeled off, wings tilting slightly in salute to the strange craft they had accompanied in. On the ground, security teams were already en route. Black Suburbans speeding from multiple directions, lights off, no sirens. Inside each vehicle were men who carried weapons without serial numbers and credentials that outranked even colonels. Kyle turned to Nguyen. "Switch tower control to standby. We're locking everything down until further notice." She nodded, but didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the taxiing jet. It passed the main hangars slowly, as though inspecting them, before easing toward the far end of the airfield, where Hangar 17 sat like a forgotten tomb. Most of the base's younger personnel didn't even know it was still active. It hadn't housed an aircraft in over a decade, or so everyone believed. As the jet rolled to a stop in front of the hangar, its main door began to lift. Dust cascaded from the creaking frame, spilling sunlight onto the polished floor beneath. The moment the hatch of the jet opened, 4 figures emerged. No uniforms, no insignias, but every one of them moved with the precision of training, military or something close. The leader was tall, pale, and expressionless. His silver hair was cut short and neat, and he wore a black suit like armor. A briefcase was clutched in his left hand, and in his right, a tablet glowing with a security seal Kyle didn't recognize. Then the base commander arrived. Colonel Diana Hartford stepped out of her armored vehicle with a brisk nod. No entourage, no aides. She approached the group alone, her heels clicking softly on the concrete. Kyle strained to hear something, anything, over the open line. Nguyen tapped the frequency board. "I can't get audio. It's been scrambled." Of course it had. Inside the hangar, the group disappeared. The door shut behind them like the lid of a sarcophagus. That was when Kyle noticed the alert that had appeared on the secondary screen, an override order from NORAD itself. All operations suspended until further notice. Command rerouted, no outgoing communications. A black hole. And they were inside it. "Sir," Nguyen said, her voice tight, "I just lost access to half our systems. They're being rerouted." Kyle didn't answer. He was watching the radar again. And that's when the second contact appeared. This time, it wasn't subtle. It came in high, 40,000 feet, straight down from orbit. Nguyen gasped. "That's a satellite drop capsule. Or, wait, no, what the hell is that?" It was fast. Burning fast. A meteor streak across the sky. The trajectory was shallow but deliberate. Controlled descent. Calculated. Target Hangar 17. Kyle's heart skipped a beat. "No way, there's no program that—" But the screens didn't lie. From out of nowhere, this object had pierced the atmosphere. It carried no beacon, no signal. Just a radar footprint that made every missile defense system scream with red alerts. And yet, no response was fired. Not from the base, not from the surrounding military grid, because they were told not to. "Sir, they shut down our intercept grid," Nguyen whispered. "We're completely blind." Then the object landed, and it didn't crash. It landed. A deep, thunderous boom rattled the windows, but there was no explosion, no debris, just a thick black cloud of smoke as the object embedded itself in the secondary lot just behind Hangar 17. And no one moved to stop it. No one even approached. The jet had brought men. The second arrival had brought something else. Kyle had never seen the base like this. No orders, no explanations, just full compliance with a chain of command so high, so compartmentalized, that even the people running the base had become spectators. Down below, Colonel Hartford re-emerged. She was walking faster now, speaking into her sleeve. Her face was pale. "Sir," Nguyen whispered, "I think we're part of something we're not supposed to see." Kyle didn't respond. He was already thinking the same thing. And then the lights flickered. For one brief second, every monitor, every HUD, every screen in the control tower went dark. Just a second. And then they came back on. But the radar had changed. There were no longer just 2 contacts. There were 5. "Multiple signals," Nguyen said, nearly breathless. "They're just appearing. No entry trace. They're here." "What kind of aircraft?" She shook her head. "No heat signatures. No air displacement. They're not flying." "Then what are they?" She looked at him. "They're standing." Kyle's blood ran cold. The monitor showed 5 new signatures. spaced evenly around Hangar 17, stationary, humanoid. They hadn't arrived in ships. They had arrived. And Kyle suddenly realized the jet was a courier, a permission slip. Whatever had just landed wasn't seeking approval. It had already been cleared. Kyle didn't realize he was holding his breath until his chest began to ache. He took a shallow inhale, eyes still fixed on the monitor as the 5 signatures remained frozen in place. There was no movement, no deviation. But something about the perfect stillness unnerved him even more than motion would have. It was like they were waiting. "What do we do?" Nguyen whispered. "We notify command? State DHS?" "We do nothing," Kyle said, forcing his voice steady. "We're already locked out. If this is what I think it is, it's above command." "But why here?" she asked. "Why this base? Why now?" He didn't have an answer, but something deep in his gut had already settled on a truth he didn't want to say out loud. Because they'd chosen this place. Colonel Hartford's voice came through again, finally, via a newly opened secure channel. "Control tower, this is Base Commander Hartford. Maintain blackout protocols. All flights remain grounded. No movement unless I give direct authorization. No one leaves, no one enters." "Copy," Kyle said. "Colonel, what are they?" A pause, then, "Not over this line." The channel clicked off. Nguyen's voice was thin. "Sir, the 5 signals, they just vanished." Kyle snapped back to the screen. She was right. They were gone. No fade out, no movement. One frame they were there, and in the next, they weren't. "Switch cameras, area-wide thermal." Nguyen toggled systems. The external feeds sprang to life. Hangars, barracks, fuel depots, all bathing in infrared overlays. They moved from one quadrant to the next until the camera hit the backlot near Hangar 17, and that's when they saw them. The 5 figures were standing still, just outside the building, casting no heat signatures, no shadows. They didn't even register properly on thermal, just faint silhouettes, like ghosts on film. All were tall, too tall. Each wore a suit that shimmered like wet graphite. No features, no faces. Nguyen recoiled slightly. "What are they made of?" Kyle leaned in. He didn't answer her because he couldn't. The suits, if that's what they were, seemed to drink light. It was as if the figures were barely present at all, like they were being rendered by something trying very hard to pretend it understood the human eye. And they weren't alone. The object that had landed moments ago was opening. Not like a ship, not like a hatch. It peeled open, petal-like, revealing something at its center. A column, or maybe a containment pod. It stood about 8 feet tall, humming with a pulse that affected every electrical circuit nearby. The cameras flickered, and for a second everything turned white. When the picture came back on, the figures were gone. The object was sealed again, and Colonel Hartford was standing just 10 feet away from it, alone. Kyle scrambled for the radio. "Colonel! Colonel, do you read me? You're—" "Quiet, tower," came her voice, measured but shaking. "Do not interrupt. Stay off comms. This isn't your world anymore." The line clicked off again. Nguyen turned to Kyle, eyes wide. "Sir, I'm locking the doors." He didn't stop her, because in that moment something shifted in the air. Even from the tower high above they could feel it, pressure, rising, like the tension before a thunderclap. Except this storm wasn't in the clouds, it was beneath their feet. Inside the pod something began to glow, red at first, then violet, then a pale, silvery blue that pulsed in rhythm with a slow, calculated beat. Ba-thump, ba-thump. Kyle felt it in his ribcage, not heard, felt. And outside the base fell still. No birds, no jet engines. Even the wind had quieted. The glow intensified. A beam of light rose skyward from the pod, cutting through the ceiling of the hangar like it wasn't there. It didn't burn. It didn't explode. It just passed through. Perfectly vertical, perfectly quiet, and impossibly bright. Then, a single voice. Not over the radio. not through any speaker. Inside their heads, simultaneous, unmistakable. "We have returned." Kyle staggered backward, clutching the edge of the desk. His knees buckled, and he dropped to one knee. Nguyen had both hands on her headset, as though trying to remove something inside her skull. Her eyes were wide, distant. Outside the tower, the light continued. "We have watched," the voice said. "We have waited. And now?" "The time for silence ends." Then came the second message, no longer words. Images, not on the screens, in the mind. Cities, empty, oceans boiling, machines that screamed, and something vast moving through space with a hunger that could not be reasoned with. Kyle saw a world burn, not Earth, another one. But the feeling, it was personal. Like he'd lost something he never knew he had. The light ceased, the beam vanished, the sky returned, and the pod, the object, the unmarked jet were all simply gone. Not vanished, not cloaked. Gone. Hangar 17 was empty. Completely. Not a footprint, not a scorch mark, not a speck of evidence that anything had ever happened at all. Nguyen was crying now, quietly, silently, like she didn't even know she was. Kyle stood, trembling. He walked to the window and looked down at the tarmac, where nothing had moved, nothing had changed. And yet everything had, because something had returned, something that had been waiting. And now that it was here, it had spoken to all of them. He picked up the red phone, the one marked in the event of contact, and dialed the number that had no name. The phone rang once, then silence. No click, no voice, just a sudden absence of tone, like the world was holding its breath on the other end. Kyle didn't speak. He knew the protocol. Wait. After 13 seconds, a span he counted exactly, heart pounding, the voice arrived. Confirmed, genderless, accentless, not synthesized, but not entirely natural either. Kyle had never heard it before, but it felt like it had always been there, somewhere in the background of his life, like the sound of power lines or blood in his ears. "Event observed?" the voice asked. He swallowed hard. "Confirmed. Contact made. 5 entities. 1 delivery, 1 image stream. They spoke." Another pause, but not silent. He could hear things in the background, code being typed, fans spinning, maybe breathing. "Any casualties?" "Negative." "Contamination?" "Unknown. No physical evidence, no radiation spikes. EM fluctuation minimal." "Transmission received on multiple levels?" Kyle nodded, even though the voice couldn't see him. "Yes, all base personnel within 1 mile were affected. Mental contact, shared images, shared auditory message." The voice went quiet again. Then, "Burn protocol authorized. Compartmentalize the event. Issue blackout orders to all tower and ground personnel. Level 7 amnestics will be deployed via gas dispersal systems within Oro 900. Full reset by 1200 hours. Kyle's throat tightened. "Wait, my team? We'll forget." A flicker of anger sparked. "She's 21, he said. "Airman Nguyen. She's not ready to lose a week of her life. She didn't sign up for this." "No one signed up for this," the voice said calmly. "They were born into it, as you were. You were warned, Major Anders. You accepted clearance. You accepted command. You knew this was possible." "I thought I had more time." "We all think that," the voice replied, almost softly. This was a contact test, minimal, controlled, a warning. Kyle felt his hand trembling. He lowered the receiver slightly, staring through the glass at the empty runway. "They said they've returned. What does that mean?" "They were here before," the voice said. "When?" The voice didn't answer, then almost an afterthought. "Secure the site. Stay isolated. Wait for retrieval." The line went dead. Kyle placed the receiver back in its cradle with a mechanical motion. He felt older than he had 10 minutes ago, older than he'd ever felt in uniform. Behind him, Nguyen had stopped crying. She was standing at the console, breathing shallowly. Her eyes weren't focused. "Sir, I think I need to sit down." "You should." He helped her to the chair. She was shaking. "I remember. It was like they knew me, not just humans. Me." She looked up, pupils dilated. "Did you see them? Did you feel them looking through your memories?" Kyle hesitated. "Yes," she swallowed. "And that one world, the burning one, it was screaming. It wasn't just destruction. It was rage." Kyle didn't want to admit she was right, that whatever they'd seen had felt personal. He reached over and toggled a hidden panel beneath the console. A biometric scanner appeared. He placed his palm on it. The device chirped and slid open, revealing a matte black container the size of a lunchbox. Inside were 5 canisters, clear, with a faint blue mist swirling inside each one. "Level 7, he said quietly. Gwen's eyes widened. "Is that—" "Memory erasure." She backed away instinctively. "No, you said there were protocols. Debriefs. Why would they wipe us?" "Because we weren't supposed to remember," he said. "No one ever is." She shook her head violently. "But this wasn't an accident. They wanted us to see. They made sure of it." "That's not our call to make." "Then whose is it?" she snapped. "Who gets to choose what's remembered?" Kyle closed the case, locked it, stood. You don't want to go down that path. But the truth was, he had already gone down it. 10 years ago, in a black site in Arizona, the first time he read a report titled Project Calypso, anticipated reemergence patterns of non-human precursors. He thought it was theoretical. He thought it was buried. He was wrong. "Sir," Nguyen said softly, "you're going to give me one of those canisters, aren't you?" He didn't speak. That was answer enough. Her voice broke. "Please, don't take this from me, whatever they are, whatever this means. I want to remember." Kyle stared at her. The protocol was absolute. But somewhere deep inside his chest, something stirred. A memory of his own first contact, the light, the voices, the feeling of being both infinitesimal and significant all at once. Nguyen was experiencing that now, and to take it from her, he turned to the window one last time. The sky was clear again. The bass hummed back to life. The world spun as if nothing had happened. But something had. Something enormous. "Get some rest," he said. "We've got a long day ahead." She blinked. "Does that mean—" "It means I'm going to pretend I dropped the canister," he said quietly. "And maybe you'll pretend you never saw it." She nodded slowly. Not a smile, but something close. Gratitude, respect, fear. Kyle slid the case back into the compartment and closed the panel. Below, the hangar was empty. The world silent. But in the distance, somewhere beyond reach, he felt them watching, waiting. And the next time they came, there would be no warning. By 0900, the skies above Travis Ridge Base were cloudless again. Fighter jets sat quietly in their bays. The tower, once alive with calls and radar sweeps, had gone eerily still. The protocols had kicked in. The memory foggers, officially labeled atmospheric calming agents, were being piped through the ventilation systems at controlled intervals. The mist was tasteless, odorless, and clinically engineered to dissipate neural synapses surrounding short-term memory events. Specifically, it would target the previous 12 hours, leaving only fragments. Dreams, static, things one could convince themselves had never happened. By 0915, most personnel would simply feel tired, disoriented maybe, a headache, a missing sense of time. But nothing they could explain, nothing they could report. Major Kyle Anders stood at the perimeter fence, away from the control tower, staring at the faint, heat-scorched lines in the tarmac where the beam had hit. The surface looked intact. But if you stood in the right light, you could see the burn, not on the ground, but in the air above it, a scar left in atmosphere. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, black, rectangular, unmarked. It had been given to him years ago with only one instruction: press once, and they'll answer. Press twice, and they'll come back. He didn't press it, not yet. But his fingers hovered over the pad, because every minute that passed he felt the pressure in his skull deepen. Not pain, not even fear, just awareness, the sense that something vast and ancient had fixed its attention on him and wasn't looking away. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Nguyen. She wasn't coughing. No red eyes. No signs of gas exposure. He hadn't reported her. She hadn't been scrubbed. He turned, surprised to see her out of uniform. Gray hoodie, hair tied back, the base pass clipped to her jeans. "I can't sleep," she said softly. "Every time I close my eyes I see that world again. The burning one, the silence after. Like it's still happening. Like it never stopped." He didn't ask how she'd avoided the foggers. He didn't want to know. Instead, he nodded. "I feel it too." She walked up beside him, arms crossed tight against the breeze. I looked it up. That hangar, 17. There's no record of it being in use, not for decades, not since the Cold War. But yesterday, she hesitated. It was like something woke up inside it. Kyle exhaled through his nose. Not woke up, arrived. "Then what was the point of the first jet?" she asked. "If the second one, the drop, was the real delivery?" He looked at her. It asked for permission. She blinked. "The jet?" He nodded. It was a courier, carrying a single authorization code, a final handshake, our last chance to say no. And we didn't. No. She was quiet for a long moment. So they came. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the faint scent of fuel and ozone. Somewhere across the base, a C-130 taxied slowly, its crew unaware they'd lost time. "How long do we have?" she asked. Kyle didn't answer right away. "Not long." That was the first flare. A probe. A test to see if we'd remember, if we'd react. They're watching what we do next. Nguyen looked up. "And if we do nothing?" "Then they'll come differently next time." She turned toward him. "Worse?" He looked back at the strip of sky where the beam had cut through. "Clearer." Her expression darkened. "Sir, if this is a test and we're the subjects, then why warn us at all? Why show us anything?" Kyle had asked himself that same question since the moment the voice had spoken. He only had one answer. Because something worse is coming, and they're not here to destroy us. He met her eyes. "They're here to see if we're useful." That hit her like a slap. She looked down, lips pressed tight. "They're not saving us, they're selecting us." Kyle didn't reply, because deep down, that was exactly what he feared. The world had been building towards something: tech, communication, surveillance, AI. Not by accident, not by human ingenuity alone. They'd been nudging it, preparing us. "You said you pressed the panic line," she said finally. "The red phone." "Yeah." "Did they say anything about coming back?" He hesitated. "Not directly, but they told me what to do if I wanted to speak again." Nguyen tilted her head. "How?" Kyle held up the black device in his hand. One press to listen, two to answer. She stared at it. The wind tugged her hair across her eyes, but she didn't move. "Are you going to press it?" Kyle looked at the horizon again. The sky was just as blue as yesterday. But he knew somewhere beyond that soft blue dome, they were waiting. Maybe in orbit, maybe in time itself, watching like gods, but indifferent as math. Not angels, not demons, just something older. He slowly lowered the device into his coat pocket. "Not yet," he said. "But when I do..." He looked at her. "You'd better be ready." She nodded once. "I will be." The next morning came heavy and gray, a cloud cover moving in that hadn't been in the forecast. At 6:30 hours, the daily weather satellite failed to transmit, followed by a brief blackout in the comms array that lasted 22 seconds. Mo dismissed it as a routine satellite hiccup. Kyle knew better. He hadn't slept. Neither had Nguyen. They didn't speak much, but they remained on base, both pretending to fall back into routine. The other personnel, those who had been exposed to the amnestics, moved like nothing had happened. If anything, they were in unusually good spirits. No tension, no complaints, even a little too calm. The erasure had worked, but Kyle felt more awake than he had in years. He watched everything now, every radio ping, every change in radar sweep, every flicker of static that could be more than a glitch. And sometime just before 0700, it happened again. The radar chirped once, then nothing. Just one clean ping, something massive and high, and then it was gone. He stared at the screen, willing it to return, but it didn't. Whatever it was, it hadn't been flying in atmosphere. It had passed across the upper boundary, near orbit, but not quite in it, which meant it had dipped down just low enough to be seen, like a whisper across glass. He clicked on the recorder and flagged the moment, a signature no larger than a pinprick, but real. "They're still up there," he said aloud. Nguyen entered the tower behind him, 2 steaming mugs in hand. "Coffee," she said. "Not laced with memory erasers, I promise." Kyle managed the barest smile. He took the cup and sipped. It was bitter, scalding, ground just that morning. "I got a letter," she said, sipping her own. "From my mom. She's in Seattle. Said she's been dreaming of lights for 3 nights in a row. Said she woke up crying, but didn't know why." Kyle stiffened. Nguyen noticed. "You think they're sending out something?" "Bleed over," he said. "Residual effects from the contact. If they can imprint memories directly, it makes sense they could leak into dreams." "Even from orbit?" He nodded slowly. "Especially from orbit." She looked out the window. "You think they're testing more than just us?" Kyle followed her gaze to the clouds above the base. "I think they're looking for something, or someone. The contact wasn't random. It never is." She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "Do you think it could be biological?" He turned to her. "You mean they left something behind?" She shrugged, but there was fear behind her eyes. "They were here for 20 minutes. That's enough time to plant anything. A device, a life form, a signal seed, something invisible, something that wouldn't show up on our scans." Kyle hated that she had thought of it, because he had too. His mind flashed back to the moment the pod opened. That column of light, the pulse through his chest, the flicker of something in the air that wasn't quite oxygen, and afterward, the silence. Not absence? Containment. He stood suddenly. "I want every environmental sensor on base recalibrated. Full sweep, radiation, particulates, infrared, magnetic flux, subsonics, all of it." Nguyen didn't question him. She moved to the console and began entering override codes, and then the tower lights flickered again, just once, enough to make both of them freeze. Kyle turned to the comms panel. No audio, no inbound signals, no phone lines active. But the emergency frequency lit up, 118.7 MHz, an open line. Kyle pressed the headset to his ear. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Travis Ridge Tower. Please respond." Silence. He repeated the call, still nothing. Then click. Not a voice, not speech, just sound, wet, organic, like a heartbeat underwater, slow, heavy. Thump, thump, thump. Nguyen's head shot up. She was hearing it too. "It's the same rhythm," she said. "From the pod, the one that was pulsing." They listened. After a few more seconds, the sound cut off. And something new appeared on the screen, a word, just one. "Awakening." It sat there, flickering. Kyle blinked. "Where the hell is that coming from?" "I'm not routing it. It's not from our system." "Screenshot everything." Already done. And then it vanished. Not just from the display, but from the logs. The system purged itself. No trace. Kyle stared at the empty screen, and for the first time since the jet arrived, he felt it again. Fear. Not of the unknown, but of the known. What little he did understand. The implication of what awakening might mean. He turned to Nguyen. "Find every file you can on Project Calypso. I want every page, every memo, every redacted fragment. We're not waiting for command." She hesitated. "They'll know. I'm counting on it." And somewhere deep in the mountain bunkers far north of the base, alarms were already blinking red. Not loud, not public, but active. Someone had accessed the archive, and the ones who'd buried it, they were waking up too. The archive wasn't digital, not entirely. It lived on a cold server housed 3 floors beneath Norcom Site 27, behind 3 layers of biometric security and a lead-lined vault door no one was supposed to open. Kyle had never seen it. He only knew it existed because years ago, during a blackout exercise, he'd caught a glimpse of a directory tag embedded in a line of scrambled code, Calypso log. He'd asked a superior about it, once. The man didn't respond, he just stared, not with anger but pity. Like Kyle had already gone too far just by speaking the name out loud. Now, as Nguyen worked at the terminal, bypassing layers of firewalls, using strings of code she shouldn't have known, Kyle paced behind her. She paused, hand hovering over the keyboard. "Sir, if we find it and we open it, we don't get to unknow, ever." He placed a hand on the back of her chair. "Then we don't stop until we do." She nodded. "Enter." The screen shifted. A plain folder appeared, no icon, no description, just a name. Calypso. She opened it. Dozens of subfiles populated the screen. Some were tagged Fission Class. Others were labeled Echo Wind. But 5 of them bore the same red code block. ExoBio 03, ExoBio 05, ExoBio 7, ExoBio 09, ExoBio 13. "Biologicals," she whispered. Kyle leaned in. "Skip to 13. The file loaded. Lines of text scrolled upward, most redacted. But one section remained. Status retired. Post-contact silence, orbital beta region. Notes. Entity designated vestige 13, interface classified. Disposition unstable, sentient, language capable. Restriction. Do not engage without V-spoke confirmation. Nguyen looked up. This was the one, from yesterday, vestige 13. Kyle's voice was low. It spoke. She clicked deeper. A video file popped open. Static. Then an image, recorded from the interior of a hangar, one eerily similar to theirs. 17, maybe. A pod like the one from yesterday sat at the center. The timestamp was from 2002. 2 men in hazmat suits stood just meters away, rifles aimed but hands trembling. A voice played, deep, male, but not human. It spoke inside the video, not dubbed, not simulated. It was there. "We slept because we remembered. You forget because you fear." The screen went black. The file closed itself. Nguyen recoiled. It was the same voice. Kyle sat down. His knees ached. "Why was this buried?" "Because it warned us," she said, and they didn't believe it. "No," he said slowly, eyes widening. "They did. That's why they buried it." Nguyen looked at the monitor again. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. There was one more file, larger than the rest. No label, just the letter, S. She clicked it. It opened slowly. This time there was no text, no footage, just an audio recording, glitching slightly. The first 10 seconds were silence. Then, a voice, female, human, panic in every breath. "If you find this, you're not cleared. That means containment failed. That means they came back." Crashing sound. Breathing. "They weren't visitors. They were gardeners. And we're the seed. They've been growing us for thousands of years." A pause. Static. "Not just our minds, our bodies, our code, everything. This planet, it's a test site. We're not unique. There are others. But this one woke up first." A long pause. Then a whisper, too soft to be entirely human. "We are watching." The recording cut. Nguyen stood up, stumbling back. Kyle sat still, frozen. Something in that voice, something in the way she said this one woke up first, unlocked a terrible clarity. "They've done this before," he said, "to other worlds, other species." "And we passed?" Nguyen asked. Kyle shook his head. "No, we're still being judged." She swallowed. "So, what now?" Kyle stood, crossed the room, opened the secure drawer beneath the console again. Inside, the black device. He picked it up, held it in his palm. One press to listen, two to answer. Nguyen stared at it. He didn't look at her. He pressed once. The device hummed. No lights, no sound, just pressure, like his ears popping at high altitude. He pressed again. Nothing happened. At least, nothing they could see. The lights dimmed. The power flickered once. Then the air grew thick. Nguyen staggered, grabbing the desk. "Sir, the temperature, it just dropped 10 degrees. Kyle exhaled slowly. They heard. The radar beeped. Nguyen turned toward it. Her breath caught in her throat. A new contact directly above the base. High orbit, but descending, fast. Kyle watched the trajectory. Too smooth, too controlled. It was coming straight down, and it was enormous. Bigger than the first pod, bigger than a jet, big enough to cast a shadow. Outside, the sky began to change color. Not dark, not gray. Just wrong. And the tower began to shake. The shaking grew stronger. Not violent, rhythmic. As if the earth itself was responding to something above, resonating, echoing. Dust drifted from the rafters of the tower as the screens flickered and dimmed, each wave of distortion pulsing in time with the object's descent. Kyle and Nguyen stood side by side now, staring out through the glass. They couldn't see it, not yet, but they could feel it. Like standing beneath a storm that had no rain, no thunder, just weight. "Altitude?" Kyle asked, his voice barely audible. Nguyen checked the radar, her fingers trembling. "Descending through 120,000 feet. Vertical speed nominal. Whatever it is, it's not burning up. It's not even pushing air." "It's not entering the atmosphere," Kyle murmured. "It's folding into it." Outside, the light changed again. The blue of the morning sky turned pale, then washed into a silvery hue that shimmered across every reflective surface. Shadows no longer pointed in the right direction. The sun was still there, but it felt eclipsed, like something else had become the source of illumination. A low-frequency hum filled the air, the kind you didn't hear with your ears, but in your bones. Birds stopped flying. Trees stopped rustling. Somewhere, deep inside the mountain range, wolves howled. And then it arrived. Above Hangar 17, a perfect sphere materialized. Not dropped, not landed, just there. It floated 50 meters above the ground, silently rotating. Its surface was polished obsidian, but deeper, like the color of oil. Layers of shapes moved beneath it, fractals folding in on themselves, never quite settling into form. Nguyen gasped. "What is that?" Kyle didn't answer. He didn't know. The sphere spun once. And from beneath it, a soft beam of light reached down, silent, weightless, and touched the roof of the hangar. The building evaporated, not exploded, not collapsed. It simply ceased. Dissolved into nothing, gone without debris. Where it had stood for decades, now there was only glass-smooth ground, reflecting the sky. Then the beam widened. A shape descended, unlike anything they'd seen before. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't a creature. It was both, or neither. It moved like liquid, but had form. Arms, or the idea of arms. A head, or something approximating one. Its body shimmered like mist over glass. And though it never touched the earth, the very presence of it pressed the air outward like a ripple in space. Nguyen clutched Kyle's sleeve. "Sir, I think it's them. The ones from the pod, the ones who spoke." He nodded. He knew it too, but this one was different. It was larger, not in size, but in presence. It didn't watch. It didn't wait. It had arrived. And it had a message. Their radios clicked. Every channel lit up. From the barracks to the command tent, every speaker, every headset, every frequency activated at once. And then the voice came. Not English, not any language, but every human being who heard it understood. "We have measured your resonance." Kyle went still. "We have heard your signal. The invitation has been accepted." Nguyen whispered, "What invitation?" He didn't answer. He remembered the device, the double press. They hadn't summoned help. They'd sent a beacon. This species is unstable, but has shown growth. Violent, but not without mercy. Primitive, but capable of recursion. The figure floated closer. Every screen across the base now showed its form. "We have come not to conquer, but to reveal." The sky split. Above the sphere, another opened. Not a crack, a window. And through it, stars, planets, shapes that had no names, whole systems, suspended in golden light, orbiting in geometries the human mind wasn't built to perceive. Gasps rose across the base. Soldiers fell to their knees. Some wept. Others ran. Most simply stood and stared, humbled by something so much more than themselves. "You're not the first. You are not alone. You were built to ascend. Now choose." Then, silence. The figure rose again. The beam withdrew, and the sphere began to fade, its form disassembling into shards of thought, motion, memory, until it was gone. Just sky remained. The air rushed back with a deafening gust. Then, silence. Real silence. The world as it had been. Except it hadn't. Not anymore. Not ever again. 1 week later, Major Kyle Anders stood at the far edge of the base perimeter, staring at the reconstructed Hangar 17. No blueprints had been filed, no contractors had been hired, but there it stood, identical. And yet, completely new. No one questioned it, because no one else remembered. The foggers had been stronger this time, enhanced. Even Nguyen. She hadn't spoken of that day again. She hadn't looked like herself for days afterward, not sad, not afraid, just quiet. Something in her had shifted. Kyle carried the black device still. It never lit up, never buzzed. But he felt it sometimes, warm in his pocket, like it knew. And one night, just before dawn, he stood alone and looked up into the sky and whispered, "We choose to remember." Project Calypso wasn't just buried. It was segmented, spread across isolated servers, encoded in ciphered fragments, each one bearing encryption layers that couldn't be broken by standard machines. But now those firewalls were falling. One by one, nodes that hadn't seen activity in years began to flicker online. Nguyen worked fast, faster than Kyle thought possible. She wasn't just trained, she was prepared. Someone had taught her where to look, and how. That fact alone unsettled him almost as much as the awakening itself. "They built this like a maze," she said, her voice low, hands dancing across the keyboard. "All roads lead to dead ends, unless you know the right shape to draw." "What shape?" She paused, then pulled up a string of symbols. Kyle leaned in. It wasn't writing, it was a pattern. Concentric lines, folding back into themselves, not unlike a galaxy, not unlike the eye of a storm. And buried within it, 5 glyphs, 5 beings, 5 visitors. She clicked one, and the terminal locked. A single phrase filled the screen. "Protocol vestige is active. Stand by for interface." "Interface?" Kyle asked. Then the air changed again, only this time not at the base. Every radio frequency across the globe hiccuped. Civilian pilots over Arizona, commercial towers in Japan, shipping lanes in the Atlantic all reported a soft distortion at 3:32 a.m. GMT. Unexplained, momentary, like static drawn through an echo chamber. Only a few people recognized it, fewer still understood it. But Kyle and Nguyen, sitting now in the flickering dark of a sealed control tower, felt it. It was a signal, a call, a response. Nguyen turned to him, pale. "Sir, something else is waking up." He checked the radar. No new contacts above the base. Then looked down. 4 red markers blinked to life. Underground. Deep underground, beneath the Sierra Nevadas, beneath the Atlantic Trench, beneath frozen Antarctic ice. And one, directly beneath Travis Ridge. "What the hell?" she whispered. "There's something under us?" The screen shifted again. Subsurface anomaly detected. Vestige root node compromised. Bioframes activating. Kyle slammed his palm on the emergency shutoff, but the system ignored him. The override was dead. Another line appeared. "You asked to remember." Nguyen backed away from the console. "They're not just visiting, they're reclaiming." The base lights dimmed again, but this time they didn't flicker back. All across Travis Ridge, generators sputtered and failed. Emergency lights came on. Communications fell silent, a silence that extended far beyond the fence lines. Satellite feeds showed similar shutdowns across 11 other locations, military installations, deep-sea labs, observatories in high orbit. One by one, blind. Not because they were attacked, because they were being turned off. Not by war, by ownership. "They seeded us," Kyle whispered. "Not just biologically, not just with messages, with infrastructure, systems, machines." Nguyen turned. "All our tech, all our defenses, it was part of them?" "No," Kyle said. "It was them." And the final screen appeared. Simple. Black letters on gray. "The door is now open. The test begins." The ground shook, not a tremor, not seismic, rhythmic. Nguyen dropped to a knee, bracing herself on the side of the console as the lights overhead swayed. Kyle grabbed the rail near the window and looked out across the base. At first, nothing. Then, far out beyond the fence line, something moved. The concrete split. It wasn't an explosion, it was a birth, as if the earth itself were peeling back to reveal something that had been waiting. A shape rose. Huge, taller than the hangars, maybe taller than the tower. At first it looked like a structure, geometric, layered in rust and dust. But then it began to unfold. Segments lifted and shifted with impossible grace. Plates locked and turned, revealing limbs, sockets, fluidics. The entire thing hissed as if taking its first breath in millennia. It was humanoid. Barely. A bipedal frame stood silhouetted against the dulling sky, more machine than beast, more architecture than robot. And its eyes, if they were eyes, were glowing. Not with heat, with recognition. Nguyen whispered, "That was beneath us this whole time." "No," Kyle said. "It was beneath humanity." The structure took a step. The tower shook again. The monitors came to life on their own. Satellite feeds from other parts of the world poured in. Each one showed the same thing. A biomechanoid structure emerging. Not all at once, but deliberately. Russia, Greenland, Kenya, the Pacific floor. Ancient, identical, synchronized. As if on cue, like a stage performance no one had been invited to see until now. Kyle turned back to the monitor. The phrase on the screen was gone. In its place was a countdown. 001937, and below it, Phase 1. Initiation, species response window. "They're giving us time," Nguyen said, "to react." "Or to prove ourselves," Kyle muttered. Whatever that means. Another alarm blared. It wasn't military. It was civilian. Incoming broadcasts, interference across every open frequency, TV stations, social media feeds, encrypted communications, all overridden by the same image. A spiral, shifting, like the symbol Nguyen had found earlier, and a single line of text. "Do you see it now?" Kyle stared at it, felt it move, not visually, but inside his perception, like it wasn't just a symbol, but a lens. He couldn't look away. His pulse began to slow, his hands unclenched. Nguyen reached toward him. "Sir, don't stare into it too long. It's trying to—" She stopped. Kyle blinked. The screen went blank and his hands were shaking. "I think I just felt something," he said. "A place, a shape, like a memory that wasn't mine." Nguyen nodded slowly. "Same here. It wasn't just a signal, it was a map or a language. I think they're trying to align us, to prepare us for something bigger." Another screen lit up, this time a live feed from orbit. A single massive object now hovered just outside the upper atmosphere, larger than any ship humanity had ever launched, angular, layered, its shape shifting every few seconds, as if even the laws of physics had to make room for it. Not a ship, a judge. And beneath it, Earth, the home they'd built, and the garden they'd forgotten they were planted in. Nguyen's voice broke the silence. "What happens if we fail this test?" Kyle didn't answer, but deep inside he knew they wouldn't destroy us. They'd start again. 0:17:42. The countdown pulsed softly in the corner of the main screen, white on black, steady and indifferent. It didn't scream. It didn't blink red. It simply existed like time itself, passive, precise, and wholly unconcerned with who was watching. Kyle stared at it, jaw set. Every instinct in him said to act. But act how? The enemy hadn't declared itself. There were no demands, no war machines descending on capitals. Just revelation. They'd pulled back the veil and left the world to decide what to do with the truth. Nguyen sat beside him, eyes scanning feeds, hands moving without rest. The longer she worked, the faster she seemed to move, as if something unseen was guiding her fingertips. Then she stopped. "Sir," she said, her voice low, "they're not just waiting for a response, they're listening." He turned. "Explain." She pulled up a visualization, an old spectrum model from deep space telemetry. "We've been recording low-level atmospheric fluctuations since the first descent. They were background noise, but now," she pointed, "they're aligning." Lines spiked, converged. "It's neural," she said, "not transmission, not sound, thought." Kyle leaned forward. "Are you saying they're inside our heads again?" "No," she said. "I think they're inside everyone's, not to control, to hear. They're sampling us, collecting impressions, fears, patterns." Kyle's eyes narrowed. "A global mind scan." "Yes?" And then, as if summoned by the very act of understanding, a new screen opened. No controls triggered it. It just appeared. A black field, and then, "We see you. We feel your patterns. You are beautiful in your chaos." And Nguyen whispered, "They're complimenting us?" Kyle wasn't so sure. "I think they're amused." The tower lights dimmed again. The air took on a charge, not electric, personal, like a presence had entered the room. Then 0:11:08. From the outside monitors, something new appeared. Over the ocean, a second ship emerged from behind the curvature of the Earth, sleek, organic. It glowed with a gentle pulse that felt less like technology and more like intention. But it wasn't one of theirs. Its signature, electromagnetic, thermal, and gravitational, matched nothing. Nguyen's console chirped. "We have a response," she said. "It's not human." Kyle blinked. "Then who?" "It's from beneath the ice shelf in Antarctica. Signal origin matches a dormant relay system we didn't even know existed until 10 minutes ago. Something's activating back." She paused. "They're not the only ones here, sir." And then the realization clicked. This wasn't a one-sided evaluation. This was a conflict. One side revealed itself. The other, still buried, had just chosen now to stand. Kyle's blood chilled. "They've been waiting for this," he muttered. "Both of them." Nguyen turned to him. "Sir, I think we're not just the test. We're the prize." Another message appeared. Different language. Sharper, compact, less poetic. "Unregistered entity detected. Vestige violation. Protocol intercept engaged." "New contact," Nguyen shouted. "Coming in fast. From deep space. And it's not aligning with either known trajectory. It's angling in deliberately. Kyle grabbed the headset. "Get me SATCOM link to STRATCOM and NORAD, right now." "I can't," she said. "They're jammed. All of them, even the ones that don't connect externally." The sky above the base changed again. This time, not in silence. A rippling wave crossed the horizon, a shimmer like heat through oil, and with it came a low, hungry hum. A new ship descended, smaller, sleeker, meaner, not like the first. This one had claws. The vessel didn't hover. It didn't announce itself with beams or signals. It dropped. Straight through the upper atmosphere like a blade slicing silk, generating no heat signature, no sonic boom. The only thing it left behind was an unsettling absence, as if gravity itself had bent away to make room for it. Nguyen stood rigid, eyes wide. "This isn't a second delegation," she said, voice low. "It's a predator." The sleek craft landed less than half a mile from the base perimeter. It didn't touch down so much as it coiled, folding its form inward like a beast preparing to strike. There were no windows, no engines, just dark, chitinous plating that rippled as though it were alive. A fissure opened down its side. Not a door, a wound. From within emerged 4 shapes. Unlike the vestige, these weren't fluid or luminous or shifting. They were solid. Hard angles, jointed limbs, armored like insects but walking like men. And they didn't hesitate. They moved with grim purpose straight toward the fence line, ignoring the high-voltage signs, ignoring everything. "Sir, they're crossing into restricted perimeter," Nguyen said, breath-catching. "They're not slowing down." "Do we engage?" someone said over base comms. "No," Kyle answered instantly. "We just provoked them. We don't know what they want." And then one of the shapes reached the fence, touched it, and melted through. Not with heat, not with force. It disassembled the metal, every molecule pulled apart like someone unraveling yarn. "Jesus," Nguyen breathed. Alarm started. Too late. The shapes were already halfway across the tarmac. And the biomech from underground, the vestige construct, finally moved. It turned, faced them, and took a step forward. The air between the two factions twisted. The pressure built so sharply that Kyle could feel his teeth vibrate. The entire tower creaked. Then, a soundless explosion. 2 of the invaders crumpled mid-step, their forms liquefying in an instant. Not burned, not blasted, erased. The other 2 stopped, raised their arms, and from them beams of jagged light, like lightning made of glass, surged at the vestige. It didn't dodge, it didn't block, it simply absorbed. And when the light cleared, it lifted its arm, impossibly long, and opened a cavity in its chest. A pulse of energy, deep and old, tore from it like a command shouted in the language of gods. And the final 2 attackers dropped. Not dead, but inert, shut down like broken tools. Kyle turned to Nguyen. "Why now?" he whispered. "Why bring this fight here?" She looked at the console. The countdown had stopped. Not at 0, at 0001 quoque. Frozen. "Waiting!" She touched the screen. It flickered, then showed a new phrase. "The others have arrived. Choose your alliance." Another line, underneath. "You were never alone in this test. You were the balance." Kyle stared. Nguyen's voice broke the silence. "It's not a test for us, sir." He turned to her. "It's a test of us, to see where we'd fall, who we'd follow, whether we'd surrender or evolve." Outside, the sky shimmered again. A portal, larger than any yet, opened above the biomechanoid. Shapes gathered in the clouds, dozens of vestige, silent, waiting. Above them all, a singular ship, shaped like a ring splitting open, hung in the air like a crown. And inside Kyle's head, the voice returned. "This is your moment, not to survive, to choose." The clouds above Travis Ridge swirled like galaxies drawn to a gravity no one could define. From their edges, more ships emerged. Silent, symmetrical, unfolding like petals from invisible stems. Each one hovered with impossible stillness, their surfaces polished so finely that the sky reflected off them in perfect replication. Dozens of them, maybe more, and below, silence. The vestige did not move. The construct stood like a sentinel, lit from within, its core still glowing with that steady pulse. The same rhythm Kyle had felt in his chest the day the pod first opened. A rhythm that no longer felt foreign. It felt like a heartbeat, his heartbeat. Nguyen looked pale, not from fear but from something deeper, a knowing. "They want us to connect," she said quietly. Kyle turned. "Connect how?" "I think they're waiting for one of us to cross the line, to step forward, like the whole sequence isn't finished until we act." He stared at her. "You think this is a ritual?" She nodded. "An invitation. One they've extended before, on other worlds. That's what the countdown was never about. It's not time. It's alignment. They're syncing their awareness with ours." "And the attack?" "A test within a test, to see what we'd do, whether we'd react with force or wait, whether we'd panic or listen." Kyle turned toward the door. He didn't remember walking down the tower stairs. But a moment later, he was outside. The air smelled like rain and static and something else, something metallic, like stars and memory. Nguyen followed silently. Across the tarmac, the massive vestige construct slowly turned toward him. Its chest dimmed, its pulse slowed, acknowledging. Kyle stepped forward, beyond the fence line, beyond the scorched remnants of the failed intruders, until he stood just 10 meters from the monolith. When behind him, the clouds rumbled above, the sky split once more, and from the great ship overhead, a beam descended. Not bright, not violent, but soft, inviting, and within it, shapes, human, not in form, but in silhouette. Each one stood like an echo of those below, fluid and bright, transparent and yet undeniable. They looked like us, or rather, what we could be. The message was clear: this is you, if you choose. Kyle turned to Nguyen. Her eyes were full of tears. "Sir, we've been wrong about everything," he nodded. "They didn't build us to serve." He looked back at the beam. "They built us to replace them." The ground beneath his feet warmed. His mind expanded, not with power, with access. The spiral returned, not on the screen, in the sky. But this time, it spun not inward, but out. The last barrier, the final illusion, peeled back from reality. And then came the final voice. Not a whisper, not in his head, all around him. "You may step forward and join the code that made you." Kyle looked up. He didn't feel fear, only a question. Was he ready? He stepped into the beam. The world disappeared. The beam didn't lift him. It dissolved him. Not physically. His body remained, heart still beating, lungs still working. But something fundamental slipped away. Like a layer had been peeled back. Like he'd been living in a version of himself that had always been incomplete. Kyle saw everything. Not with his eyes, but with some part of his mind that had been dormant until now. The base vanished. The earth vanished. He stood in a great field of consciousness, stretching infinitely in every direction, not as a man, but as a pattern, a frequency, a being rendered legible to something older than stars. And across that endless field stood others, not aliens, reflections, humanity as it might become. Tall, radiant, minds unshackled by fear, unclouded by time. They didn't speak, they understood. And they showed him everything. The truth came as image, memory, emotion, all at once. The vestige had not come from the stars. They had risen from them, a race not bound to one world but seated across thousands. Not conquerors, gardeners. They had planted life in the fertile soil of suitable planets, biological evolution paired with cognitive architecture, Each species left to grow on its own timeline. Most failed, turned on themselves, turned inward, destroyed their potential. But some opened. And when they did, the vestige returned, not to control, but to offer, an invitation to ascend, to become part of the great lattice of awareness that stretched between worlds, between dimensions, between eras. Kyle saw Earth's timeline like a strand of DNA, twisting, fracturing, mending. Moments of hope, moments of war, moments where a single mind had almost broken through, and moments where billions had turned away from the path. But now a window had opened, and Earth was being watched. Judged? No. Measured. Not by force, by readiness. Kyle turned inside the field. He saw Nguyen, not physically, but her awareness. Bright, sharp, beautiful in its velocity. He saw the others too, pilots, civilians, children dreaming of stars, all connected through that pulse they'd shared without knowing. And above them, the others, not the attackers, the first ones, silent, patient, waiting behind veils of time. Kyle understood now. The false arrivals, those clawed angular machines, had not been invaders. They had been tests, constructed adversaries, proxies of fear. They'd been planted centuries ago, waiting for the moment to rise, to give humanity a familiar enemy, to see if fear would rule them, or if something else might emerge. And now the verdict had come. Kyle's body, still on the tarmac, glowed faintly. So did Nguyen's. So did hundreds across the world. Those who had listened, those who had seen. And one by one, the beams expanded, not to destroy the old world, but to elevate its next phase. The message was final. You have not passed. You have not failed. You have opened the door. Now choose what walks through. And then everything came back. The field vanished. The beam withdrew. The sky returned. Kyle collapsed to one knee on the tarmac, breath ragged. Nguyen rushed forward, helping him up, her skin still faintly lit from within. Around them, the base stood in stunned silence. The vestige constructs were gone. The clawed machines melted into nothing. But above, the great ship still hung, watching, waiting. And the spiral, now tattooed in Kyle's memory, pulsed once more. Humanity had been seen, and what came next would be theirs to define. The ship remained for 3 more minutes, long enough for every sensor on Earth to register its presence, long enough for every satellite to try and fail to pierce its hull, long enough for the world to see that something had come, and chosen not to leave by force but by will. Then, at 6:07 UTC, it vanished. No burst of light, no rift in the sky, just gone like it had never been there. But it had, and so had the message. Across the globe, strange dreams persisted. People woke remembering spirals, hands reaching out of stars, laughter in languages they didn't know but somehow understood. No one could explain it, not the scientists, not the generals, not the journalists. But something inside everyone had changed. Not beliefs, not politics, something deeper. The awareness that we were not alone, and never had been. At Travis Ridge, Kyle sat on the edge of the now silent runway, boots scuffed, uniform dirtied. In the distance, the tower blinked quietly, back to its usual rhythm. Ground crews moved slowly, like waking from anesthesia. No one asked what had happened. Not aloud. But they knew. Nguyen sat beside him, quiet. A full sunrise bathed the base in pale gold. She was holding the small black device, the one with no label, no port, no signal. "I haven't pressed it," she said. Kyle didn't answer right away. Then, "You don't have to. Not anymore." She nodded. "It's still warm." They sat in silence for a long time. Behind them, the earth turned, and humanity did what it had always done, worked, struggled, hoped. But something was different. Satellite feeds began detecting new energy fields, in places long thought dead. Old megaliths lit up under infrared. The spiral appeared in cave paintings where no pigment should have survived. And around the world, a few hundred people began seeing things before they happened. Not visions, predictions, as if their minds were remembering futures that had yet to be chosen. Kyle received a message on a hardline 2 days later. A single sentence. Travis Ridge is no longer a base. It's a doorway. You're the keeper. No signature, no return channel. He walked the hangars at night now, alone, but not lonely. There were moments, brief, quiet, when he felt it again. That pulse, like the heart of something sleeping under the concrete, not gone, just resting, waiting. And he would look up into the stars, not for ships, not for invaders, but for reflections. Nguyen left the service 3 months later, started a school in Oregon. No electronics, no curriculum, just teaching children how to sit still and listen, how to recognize silence. Because that's how it had begun, hadn't it? Not with a war, not with a sound, with a pause, with an unmarked jet. And a voice that stopped every takeoff. 6 days later, undisclosed location, Nevada. The room had no windows, just smooth black walls, temperature-controlled air, and one long table that stretched like a surgical blade under a row of cold lights. Kyle sat at the head. Across from him were 6 men and women, some in military uniforms, others in dark suits, one in a white lab coat with no insignia. Each had different clearances, different agendas, but all had gathered for the same reason. "What you saw," said the woman on the far left, "goes beyond the remit of any national defense protocol." "No kidding," Kyle replied flatly. The man beside her slid a tablet forward. "You're aware of the emergence patterns that followed?" "Yes." "Do you believe," the man asked, leaning forward, "that this was a targeted intervention or a global declaration?" Kyle looked up. "They didn't target us. They exposed us to ourselves, to each other. It wasn't a warning. It was a mirror." The man didn't like that answer. He sat back, lips tight. "You want to contain it?" Kyle said. "You can't. It's already in the air, the dreams, the signals, We've traced 72 civilians exhibiting abnormal neurological readings since the beam event," the woman interrupted. 17 of them are children." Kyle nodded. "Good. That means it's working." "Working?" the third man barked. "What exactly do you think is working?" Kyle stood slowly. "Evolution." Silence. He placed his hands on the table. "They didn't give us anything we didn't already have. They just opened the gate. And now, some of us are walking through. They've disrupted our systems, our governments." "No," Kyle interrupted. "They revealed them, shattered the illusion that we were in control. We never were." The woman in the lab coat finally spoke. "If what you're saying is true, then Earth is no longer a sovereign planet." Kyle looked at her. It never was. She met his eyes, and didn't argue. Elsewhere, South Pacific Ocean. Coordinates restricted. The ship had landed beneath the surface. No splash, no seismic wave. Just a sudden presence on the ocean floor where none had been before. It sat there, humming, watching, 3 miles beneath the waves, immobile. And yet, active. Nguyen and exploratory drones were dispatched. 3 were lost. The 4th returned with a single fragment of video. It showed a doorway, carved in the side of the ship, and around it, etched in concentric circles, the spiral. Back at Travis Ridge, Nguyen stood barefoot in the center of what had once been Hangar 17. The floor had changed. What was once concrete was now something else, smoother, warmer. It responded faintly to touch, like glass that remembered pressure. Around her, dozens of young cadets trained in silence, not in weapons, in stillness. They didn't run drills. They sat, listened, meditated. And then they spoke of things they had no language for, places they hadn't been, futures they hadn't lived. One girl, no older than 10, drew a symbol in the dirt that matched a glyph hidden in the vestige archive Kyle had uncovered weeks earlier. No one had shown her. She said she saw it in a dream. Nguyen smiled and kept listening. 1 year later, northern Arizona. The monument stood on no map. It wasn't carved from stone or built from steel. It had emerged overnight on an empty plateau west of the Coconino Forest. A tower of mirrored material, spiraled and silent, standing 10 stories high, embedded into the rock like a fossil of the future. No roads led to it, and yet people came. They walked, hiked, slept under stars for days just to stand beneath it. It never spoke, never moved, but some claimed it dreamed. They said that if you pressed your palm to the side long enough, you would feel something, not a vibration, not warmth. A presence, one that made you remember things you never lived. On the anniversary of the Travis Ridge incident, what news agencies now called the awakening, Kyle returned. He didn't wear his uniform anymore. He no longer needed it. The world had changed, not in fire and destruction, but in attention. Like the planet had blinked open after thousands of years of sleep. He stood alone at the base of the monument, wind stirring dust around his boots. Nguyen arrived silently. She stepped beside him, said nothing for a long time, and then, "More kids are dreaming the spiral." He nodded. "I know. Some of them are speaking in tongues, languages that don't exist." "They will," Kyle said. "Someday." A gust of wind moved across the plain. From the distance, voices, not raised, not praying, just present, the way humanity had once been long ago before it forgot how to listen. Nguyen placed her hand against the monument. Her eyes fluttered. Kyle watched. After a moment, she smiled. "Still warm," she whispered. Kyle took a breath, let it out slowly. Then he turned to her, voice quiet. "They're not coming back." "No," she said. "Because we're going to meet them this time." She looked to the stars. "They're waiting." Kyle nodded once, then placed his hand beside hers on the tower. And for just a moment, barely perceptible, the surface rippled, like it remembered them. And then the silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full.